We're going to talk about UX design and business and design and user research and what is the user interface design. And I'm also bringing you some references at the end that you can read, or some stuff that I found very inspiring. So at the end of this 60 or minutes or session, you will be exposed to some ideas and concepts, and these ideas hopefully will empower you to think differently about the products that you're building. So what is UX design? To me, it's the process of building trust with your users. So when you build trust, it drives customers' loyalty and retention and word of mouth. And this is when you know that you have built a great product. But it's a process. So there's different stages, and we're going to go through these stages together. But I'd like to start with one example. About 5 years ago, there's this young experienced designer called Nikki, and she lives in the States, and she's a driver. She has a car, and she thinks the signage is a very poor experience. Every time she drives, she's frustrated. She can't read what's on the signs. There's too many signs. The placement is bad. The whole experience is very poor. So she thinks I can do a better job, and she wants to redesign these signs. So her approach is customer centric. So what it means is that she wants to place herself in the shoes of the user, in this case, the driver. And in order to achieve that, she wants to ask very simple questions. So the questions that she feels she would be asking when she drives. So can I park here? For how long can I stay? And will I get a ticket? Right now on the right, you see the signs. They seem very random, and it leaves you with a feeling that, I can't really understand that. Am I stupid? If I park here, am I going to get a $75 fine? So this is not good, right? So she starts working, and she sets herself some constraints. So constraints are very important in design, because in design, you can do everything, but you need constraints to sort of guide you towards a set of solutions. So it's similar like a game. You have some rules. So the constraint that she sets for herself are, she only wants to use 2 colors, and she wants to reduce the amount of text. She noticed the signs are very wordy, and she wants less text, and she wants to come up with a unified format. Okay. So after certain rounds of work, she comes up with this design, which is fantastic, and it answers the 3 questions that she has set herself to answer. And she used the 2 colors, and it's a unified format. Here you see different versions of for different neighborhoods, right? But she doesn't stop here. She wants to get user feedback. So she goes out in the street, she prints out her mock-ups, and she goes in the street and she pastes it in the street. And right below, she leaves a comment box, just a piece of paper inviting the drivers to leave a feedback. So she very simply asks the question, what do you think about these signs? Do you think they're easier? And she also leaves an email address, and if people wants to, write more. And she starts collecting these feedbacks. And these feedbacks will inform second round of iteration. So there's a guy complaining he's colorblind and the color doesn't quite work well at nighttime, and so she's going to address these problems, right? And when she's done with that, she goes to the city council and she sells her work. And the result is that they ended up producing these signs, and it's been a success. And other cities have asked to use the same system, and so that's the work of Nikki. And she has successfully brought hierarchy in the mess that it was previously. She used color for coding. She's managed to unify the format, and she's also added some icons, and which is a richer visual language. So all that we've discussed about Nikki is the process of UX design, sorry. So it's the process that can work for just analog products, and it works for digital products. It's the same. It's called UX design or experience design. Actually, there's a lot of terminology. I like to call that just experience. So the UX design is a process for building products that are easy to use, and that products that user needs, products that user wants, and products that will make user happy. It's not a completely new process or way of thinking. Actually, early in the last centuries, industrials were already thinking of ways to make the work better. They wanted to increase productivity. And Don Norman, which is he's a scientist and an engineer. He's very well known amongst the community of experience designers. He sort of dedicated his life to studying how design communicates as a link between an object and the users. He's sometimes referred as the father of experience design. So what's interesting about him is, so he's from the US. At some stage in his life, he was forced to live in the UK. So he moved to the UK. And just as Nikki, he started being very frustrated. But he was frustrated about doorknobs, electric switch in the UK, the water tap. And he was so upset and frustrated about his interaction with these objects that he wrote a book. This book is The Design of Everyday Things. It's been published 1988, I believe. And it's been a massive hit, bestseller for writings about experience design. And he also worked for Apple. He worked for Apple Computers. And while he was at Apple, he changed his title from architect engineer to experience engineer. So he's considered as the one who really coined this terminology of user experience. There's one other thing that's quite funny that he's known for is what people refer to the Norman door. I don't know if you've heard about this. Basically, it's a door that you don't know if you need to push it or pull it. And it's a very sort of common problem that he talks about in his book. There are 6 principles, and one of which is what he called affordability, is how much the product tells you without any explanation, gives you hints on how you need to use it. So the Norman door is a door that doesn't give you any clue, and you're standing in front of this door and you don't know what to do. And a door is pretty simple. You can only push it or pull it. So it's a big problem when you hear about the Norman door, now you know what it is. So that's it for the Norman, and the user experience design also connects with 3 fields, one of which is the business. So the business is where you set your goals. The user is where you do the user research, and then finally you go on and design an interface. So we're going to talk about these 3 fields. First of all, the business and the design. So setting clear goals and defining success. The business and the design, they always go hand in hand. So when a business changes in a company, usually it's followed by a change in the design and in the product and in the experience, and sometimes all 3 together. And when you also notice a design change in a company, usually it means or it indicates that there is a change in the business. Thibaut mentioned that I did a work for a champagne called Mum in France. And I was asked to rethink a premium experience for this champagne. And when I talked to the stakeholders, they didn't just tell me, we want to sell more of this product, or we want to sell more of this product, and this product is going to be more expensive, so we're going to make more money. Actually, their strategy was pretty clear. They needed to, they wanted new customers. They wanted to attract high income customers. And we didn't just redo the design and do a beautiful packaging. We envisioned an end user experience with an app, with new services, and a new distribution concept and a new loyalty program. So this kind of illustrates the importance of having very clear goals. And I believe a lot of answers can be found in a digital strategy when you can put your hands on it. So from a user perspective, the experience will always be what happens between a machine, the user, and the interface. It's nothing else than that for the user. But for a business, from a business perspective, the same experience is measured in ROI, in conversion rate, or whatever rate you're defined to track, right? For example, for developers, they can say they had a successful day when they shipped some code and the tests return and the tests are good, right? But for the business owner, until he achieves the success that he sets for his business, he's not going to be satisfied. The product is not going to be a success, right? So how do you measure success? If the success for a user is got nothing to do with the success for a business owner. So I believe you can do that with a business strategy. So success is best measured when the business goals are translated clearly into a digital strategy. And this digital strategy needs to inform everyone in the team at every stage of the maturation of the product. You could launch a prototype and this prototype miss his primary target, but then you realize that it opens to some new opportunities in a neighboring field, right? There's this famous example of YouTube that they started as a video-based dating app. So probably people don't remember that, but at the beginning, YouTube was a website you would go and to find a partner, like a dating app. You can upload some videos of you explaining who your ideal partner is, right? And they realized the opportunity of hosting videos, and then they pivoted the business into this giant empire of video streaming, right? So this is to illustrate that the business and the design always go hand in hand, and when the business changes, the design is going to change. When the design changes, the business changes, and it's important to have a very clear digital strategy. And one way to be informed about this digital strategy is to hold a stakeholders interview, right? So you can ask the right questions. I personally like to ask a lot of questions, and it sort of reduces the risk to embark on a sinking ship, right? You get also to understand what's the level of understanding these people have about what is product design. And you'd be surprised of how many stakeholders don't really know what is like modern UX or modern product design. You also get to understand what are their priorities and expectations for the project. So this is very, very important. So that's pretty much all you can do in terms of knowing or understanding the business. Sorry about that. So we've covered what we can learn about the business, and but there's still a lot more that we need to know, right? And that's the part where you start to do user research. So that's what's called going out of the building. So you go out and you do your research. And I'm going to talk about a series of methods that we can use to better understand the user. Now that we understand the stakeholder, we want to understand the user. Let me start with this example. So Airbnb, everybody knows that when Airbnb has beautiful pictures, right? They're very picky about the quality of their picture. And this example is to illustrate that by doing some research and having an assumption and followed by research, then it can lead to great success or exponential growth. So Airbnb at the beginning, they didn't have this kind of pictures. They had just very standard images. But the founders, they thought we can add value to our product by simply designing a better experience. So they had this assumption, and they want to measure it. And they know that they can build up an MVP for very cheap. And because they have the data, they can just measure what they're doing, and they can do it until they find a solution that they're happy with, right? So at this stage, they're already connecting hosts to renters. And they feel like having a better quality photography could give them an edge in the market. And they started their experimenting around 2011. And they had a team of 20 professional photographers going in the field and taking photographs of apartment for their hosts. And that's when they saw this growth in terms of nights booked, right? So this sort of validated the founders' first hypothesis. But also they realized that the hosts were happy with them taking those photographs for them. So by just researching on an assumption and responding to a user demand, they were actually able to add a revenue stream, because now they have this service of professional photography that they can sell and make money out of it. they raise the bar on the photo quality. And this is important because it gives them an edge against the competition. They make their hosts happy, and they upgrade their service, and they build trust amongst their user. And we know that trust drives customer loyalty and retention and word of mouth. So user research is your ally, and growth can come from an aspect of your business that you don't expect. That's why research is important. Right, so user research is a set of methods to better understand your user, what your user needs, the user goals, the user behaviors. And you better run these methods at any stage of the design process. So let's talk about some kind of methods that we can use, right? Generally, we group them in two groups. There is qualitative methods and quantitative methods. And there are methods that are best suited to use before you launch your product, during the launch, and after the product has launched. So the first one is you can collect data with online surveys. So to better understand what your user needs and what they want. You can also collect feedback on Twitter and listen to your user suggestions about new features. Here on the right, you have, that's a screenshot I took a couple of days ago about Figma asking their community about a feature that they want to implement. A feature that's linked to this coronavirus crisis. And so they're collecting feedback and asking their user, how do you think we should collaborate or work together in this kind of crisis? So that's very common, and companies like Figma, they have a very tight relationship with their audience or with their community, and it's very easy for them to get this kind of feedback. You can also map out the ideal user journey. So this is about knowing where the user is coming from before he used your product and where he's going next after he used your product. When you know that, it's easy to build the information architecture, which is about defining a content strategy and defining a sitemap and a navigation tree. Most likely, we're going to build some prototype and invite people to use the prototype, and so this can validate the behaviors. Of course, we have web analytics that I believe you have discussed in length during the previous session. It helps you better understand how your users behave on your live product. You can collect feedback with a bot. So you can request feedback about an experience the user just had. And what you don't want to do is be a hustler. So you don't want to ask too much information or having too many pop-ups. For example, on this website that I was visiting a couple of days ago, as soon as you land on it, you have these three pop-ups asking you to subscribe, asking you to buy more or to give more information. This doesn't build trust. This is not good. And another thing that's important is the wording. So the wording is key. So you better hire a UX writer. The UX writer is going to make sure that everything that you write is coherent and cohesive with the branding of your company. So we've seen a bunch of methods, and these methods can be grouped into groups: qualitative, like usability testing, focus groups, ethnographic studies, and quantitative, which is the web analytics, A/B testing, online service. That's it for the user research. I would like to say that by pushing for more user research in your company, this could be framed as growing the curiosity across the team to learn more about the users and the product space. User research is so important, but it can it gives the impression that it's quite boring because it's a lot about processes and protocols and numbers. But user research is actually very fun, and you cannot achieve product success if you don't have this information because you're building a product for a user. So I encourage you to do user research. Now we're going to jump into the field of user interface. Thibaut, how are we doing with the time?
You're on time. Please keep going.
Excellent. So building an interface, the interface is the part of the system that a user can see and interact with. We have many of examples of this interface. Actually, in the physical world, a door or in a car, these are all interfaces. And digital products like a website or an app is also digital user interface. So an interface is whatever stands between you and an object, whether it's analog or digital. Human-computer interaction design is the part of this science that specifically addresses the interface. And what's funny is that when they first introduced the PC, the personal computers, no one had seen this before. So it was completely new. And they were wondering what was the best solution to build a computer and to build an interface that common people could understand. And so they decided to build this as a desktop in an office where you have folders and you have files, you can put the files in folders, and when you don't want them anymore, you can put them in the trash bin. And this patterns, these metaphors are very common even today. We tend to explain interactions and use examples from the real life. I want to tell you a little bit more about the evolution of design. So this on the right is one of the first versions of Microsoft Word. And this is what happens when we're adding too many features and then we're sacrificing the UX. So from there, which is about 40 years ago, you land here, which is this picture is Lucid Charts, which is a software to build charts. So it took us about 40 years and a lot of explanations, a change of mindset, and a very disruptive product. So of course, there's a lot of work that's been done, work about design, but mainly there is a mindset switch that we need to understand that the user is not as smart as a machine. And that was something that we've learned in the process. Also, we've learned that we still need to give a lot of explanation. When I use a new software, somebody has to explain how it works. I'm sure the first teams that are now around the world that have never used Slack, and now because of the crisis, they need to go on and use Slack. So the company buys a Slack for the whole employees. A lot of them, they won't know what they can do with Slack. So there's always a lot of explanation that is needed because these products are very complex, right? And a very disruptive product. So the very disruptive product is the iPhone. So when the iPhone came, it totally changed the way we would build products for mobile, but also products for the web. So the iPhone kickstarted this revolution and forced a major shift in the practice and principles of UX design. Basically, on an iPhone, you need to build very complex interactions that would fit in the size of an app that goes into your pocket. And these interactions, you no longer use a keyboard and a screen. You use your thumb. You need to pack the apps with a lot of features and content that makes this app useful. But still, they need to be very simple, right? So this operated a complete revolution and a shift in the mindset. So from this big screen, now we had to produce apps that were even better and more complex, but on a tiny, very, very tiny real estate. So one thing that you would be logical to do, right, is to just shrink. You would shrink whatever you have on the desktop, you take it and you reduce it. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So this change of size means also that if you want to have an intuitive user experience, then you need to adjust probably the business strategy. While I was at Vogue, we had this digital project where they wanted to build an app, small editorial app. But the teams, the whole company was really at the onset of their digital transformation. So there were some people who were trained, and most of them were not trained. And there was a lot of resistance into thinking about this new product or project as a new app, as something different. They would just think, we're just going to take whatever we have as content that we print on our magazines or on our website, and we're going to shrink it and put it in the app. So this was not very successful, and the app, I can't say the app is a success. And even the name Vogue Mini sort of hints to their mindset. The mindset was, we're just going to make it smaller, right? So mobile design is putting traditional design skills to the test, and you cannot afford to have the same mindset. Now, I would like to talk about the responsive, or thinking responsively. We're all familiar about responsive design, where you have some components that can adjust their size. And but what's interesting is that now that you have an intuitive experience on mobile, then you cannot afford to have a website that doesn't have the same experience, right? So this revolution of having mobile phones also re-influenced back the web based app, because they needed to have a very similar experience. So it's driving towards a unification of user experience across all devices, ensuring that this web user experience is exactly the same as the experience you have on an app. Also, we tend to see a unification in the aesthetic. So this mobile first aesthetic, because everybody is accessing the services and softwares with a mobile first, then this is the aesthetic that is predominant around all the softwares and the web apps. What the designer job, we call that sometimes pixel pushing. So I just want to go briefly about give you a refresh of what these people do. So it's about translating the user experience into an interface. And we would first build a user flow, and then you build a grayscale wireframe with some components, and then you can build a prototype with some animations. And this prototype you can give to your users to test. And the final stage would be to build a mockup where you add the content, and you're going to add some more elements of design and color. So of course we can do all this, and we can do this pretty fast because they invented some new design tools for us. And one of the design tools that we use the most is a design system. So the nature of software has changed so much that, for example, today I read that Google ships code every 11 seconds. So it's becoming like a sports game, right? It's more like you have a sport team and they're doing sprints, which is good for Decathlon because they sell a lot of sports goods. But basically what it says that is you need to work smarter. It's not about working fast. You need to work smarter. And building a good design system can help you do that. Because then you have these components that can be reused and shared, and you can scale them, and you can respond to the speed, the market speed. Whatever design system or framework that you choose to use, make sure that it's very simple, that it's accessible, and most of all, you want it to be the single source of truth. And this is something that has changed a lot. For example, with Figma, which is a cloud-based design tool. And at any time, if you're looking for a logo, you don't need to ask your colleague who knows the designer, who's worked on the latest version, because the latest version is always the only one that you have access to. So this is called the concept of single source of truth. So if you have a solid design system, you can give everyone the opportunity to think like a designer. Which brings me to this. Everyone is a designer. So it's not so much a question of roles anymore. It's a question now about setting rules, the right rules for collaborations within your group. And it means that the conversation is open to every team member, whether they're designers, developers, or stakeholders. Because at the end, whether you write code or you're building a database, or maybe you're writing a commercial strategy, everyone is a designer. I want to leave it there and show you a couple references that I like, maybe you would like to read. And then I'll also share some websites that I think are very interesting. And then the floor will be open for questions. So these are books that I've enjoyed very much reading. And the last one is The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. And these are a couple websites that I like to go to when I have some questions. The one in the middle, and then the Nielsen Norman Group is has humongous references and articles about what is your user experience. Some other of these links are most explaining what the trends are. Don Norman also has a website with great articles, which is the first one on the left. And on the top right, you have Figma. And Figma, to me, is the absolute reference for design. So I invite you all to go and check the app, also go and check their website and check their blog. And I want to leave you with this statement by Marshall McLuhan. Because no matter how much we learn or read books and teach ourselves and by using new softwares or being more clever, we will never, as soon as you think you have an answer, then there's a new technology that completely changes everything. So with each new technology is not just a picture in the frame that changes, but the whole framework, which is to say, the whole tool that you use to read what happens in the world. So everything changes constantly, and the best way is just to surrender to change. And if you want to have more discussions on a one-on-one on that, I invite you to scan the QR code, WeChat, and we can talk more.